We are removing the lady from the company immediately. Security will escort her to the exit." Those words came out of my son Robert's mouth, without him even lifting his eyes from the computer. His voice sounded cold, mechanical, as if he were reading any standard corporate announcement. I was standing in front of his desk, the same solid oak desk my late husband and I had bought 35 years ago, when this was nothing more than a dream and 3 sewing machines in a rented warehouse. Now that desk was in a glass office on the 12th floor with a panoramic view of the entire city, and my son occupied it as if it had always belonged to him. The lady. That's what he called me. Not Mom, not Alice. The lady. As if I were a stranger who had trespassed into a place where I no longer belonged. I felt the eyes of every employee piercing me from the other side of the glass. The operations room was full. More than 40 people had stopped working to witness the scene. Some had wide eyes, others looked uncomfortably at the floor, but all of them were there, silent witnesses to my public humiliation. Jennifer, Robert's wife, was leaning against the filing cabinet with her arms crossed and a barely concealed smirk on her lips. She wore an impeccable gray suit and heels that clicked every time she moved, as if to make sure everyone knew she was present. She looked me up and down with that calculated disdain that only a woman like her can perfect. I was wearing a simple, elegant dress, the same type of clothes I always wear to work. Nothing ostentatious, nothing that drew attention. In 40 years of building this textile empire in New York City, I never needed to shout to be heard. Robert kept typing on his computer. He didn't even have the decency to look me in the eye while he was throwing me out like a troublesome employee. This was his first day as CEO, his first darn day, and the first thing he decided to do was humiliate the woman who gave him life, who built every inch of this building with her own hands, who sacrificed years of her youth so that he could have a future. 2 security guards appeared at the door. One of them was George, a man who had worked with us for 12 years. I had watched him grow professionally. I had gone to his daughter's graduation. I had given him a bonus when his wife was sick. Now he looked at me with eyes full of confusion and shame, not knowing what to do. "Your badge, please." Jennifer's voice cut the silence like a knife. She extended her hand with that irritating confidence of someone who believes they have already won. "We need to recover all corporate access. New administration policy." New administration? As if 40 years of history could be erased in one morning. As if every difficult decision I made, every sleepless night reviewing finances, every supplier I convinced to give us credit when no one believed in us, all of that could disappear because my son decided I was no longer useful. I slowly took the badge from my neck. I held it in my hand for a moment, feeling the weight of the worn plastic. That badge had my photo from 15 years ago, when my hair was still completely black and the wrinkles around my eyes were just beginning to show. The company was bringing in $3 million annually back then. Now we were bringing in $87 million. I took the badge and placed it gently on the desk, right in front of Robert. He still wouldn't look at me. Coward. That's what he was. A coward who needed his wife to do the dirty work while he pretended to be busy with important matters. "I want to do this right," I said in a calm voice. So calm that even Jennifer frowned for a second. "Tell your wife the board meeting in 3 hours should be interesting." Robert finally looked up. There was something in his eyes, a mixture of confusion and annoyance, as if my words had been a pesky fly interrupting his moment of glory. "There is no board meeting today, Mom." His voice was condescending, as if he were speaking to a confused elderly woman. "Don't worry about those things anymore. Rest. Enjoy your retirement." Retirement. The word floated in the air like venom. I was 69 years old, it's true, but my mind was sharper than ever. I knew every number, every contract, every legal detail of this company better than anyone else in this building. And he was talking about retirement as if I were an exhausted employee ready to collect her pension and disappear. "Of course," I replied with a small smile. "Forgive the confusion." I turned and walked toward the door. George stepped aside automatically. I didn't need an escort. I knew the way out better than anyone. After all, I had designed the layout of this building. As I walked down the hall, I heard the murmurs. Some employees kept looking, others pretended to work, but their fingers weren't moving on the keyboards. I recognized every face: Mary from accounting, Scott from logistics, Jane from human resources. All of them knew me. They knew who had signed their paychecks for years, who had approved their vacations, who had cried with them at funerals and celebrated at weddings. But now they were watching me leave like an expelled intruder. I reached the elevator and pressed the button. The doors opened almost immediately. I stepped in and turned around to look one last time toward Robert's office. He had already returned to his computer. Jennifer watched me from behind the glass with that victorious smile plastered on her face. Poor woman. She had no idea what was coming. The elevator doors closed, and I began my descent. I took my phone out of my purse and dialed a number I knew by heart. "Richard, it's me. I need you to come to my house in 1 hour. Bring the documents we keep in the office safe." "Yes, those. The ones for the original deed and the articles of incorporation." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Did something happen?" Richard asked, his voice worried. He had been our lawyer for 30 years. He knew every legal secret of the company. "My son just made the biggest mistake of his life," I replied, as the elevator doors opened on the ground floor, "and in 3 hours, he is going to realize it." I drove home in absolute silence. I didn't even turn on the radio. I just needed the sound of my own thoughts organizing themselves like dominoes, ready to fall one after another. 40 years. 40 darn years building something from scratch, and my own son treats me like garbage on his first day of power. The irony was almost poetic. Almost. I arrived at my house, a modest residence in a quiet suburb outside Boston that I bought 20 years ago when the company finally started making real money. Nothing ostentatious. A 2-story house with a yard and a small fountain in the front. Robert always complained that I didn't live the way a successful CEO should live. He said it looked like the house of a retired schoolteacher, not of a woman who ran an $87 million annual company. But that was exactly the difference between him and me. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I entered the house and went straight to my study. The walls were covered with photographs. My husband and me the day we signed the first big contract with a department store chain. The inauguration of our first real factory. Robert as a boy, smiling in his little school uniform. Robert at his college graduation. Robert the day I told him that one day this entire company would be his. How stupid I was. I sat down at my desk and opened the bottom drawer. The thick manila folder I hadn't touched in years was there. I took it out and placed it in front of me. Inside were all the original company documents, articles of incorporation, property records, stock distribution, operating contracts, everything signed, sealed, and registered before a notary public 35 years ago. When my husband died 8 years ago, many assumed the company would automatically pass to Robert. But my husband had been very clear in his will. Everything was left in my name, every share, every asset, every decision. He trusted me because he knew I was the one who truly understood the business. He was good with people, charismatic, a born salesman. But I was the one who handled the numbers, the one who negotiated with the banks, the one who made the difficult decisions no one else wanted to make. 80% of the shares were registered in my name. Robert had 5% that I gave him when he turned 30, a symbolic gesture to make him feel part of something. The other 15% was distributed among 3 board members, loyal people who had been with us since the beginning. Alan was one of them. He had been my husband's best friend and one of the first investors when no one else believed in our idea. Last week, when I told Robert I was naming him CEO, I saw something in his eyes that I should have recognized as a warning. It wasn't gratitude, it was ambition. Or worse yet, it was Jennifer's ambition reflected in him like a mirror. Jennifer. That woman entered our lives 3 years ago like a calculated tornado. She met Robert at a corporate event, and they were married in 6 months. I tried to warn him. I told him it was too fast, that he barely knew her, that something about her didn't feel right to me. But he was blinded. She was beautiful, intelligent, ambitious. She said all the right things at the right time. And little by little, she began to poison my son against me. Subtle comments at first. "Your mother is from another generation. She doesn't understand modern business. You should have more control over strategic decisions. She treats you like a child, not the professional you are." And Robert, my son who once hugged me and told me I was his hero, began to change. He became distant. He questioned every one of my decisions. He came to board meetings with proposals that clearly were not his ideas, but Jennifer's, who had never worked a single day in our industry but suddenly thought she was an expert in textiles. The doorbell rang. I looked at the clock. Richard had arrived on time, as always. I opened the door, and there he was, a man of 72 with completely white hair and eyes that had seen too many legal battles. He carried a worn leather briefcase in one hand and an expression of genuine concern on his face. "Alice, what happened?" He walked into the house without waiting for an invitation. In 30 years of friendship, formalities had long disappeared. "My son threw me out of my own company this morning," I said, closing the door. "In front of all the employees, he called me the lady and ordered security to escort me to the exit." Richard stood still for a second. Then he let out a dry, incredulous laugh. "He can't be that stupid." "Oh, but he is, and he has a wife who is even stupider but much more dangerous." We sat down in the living room. Richard opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder even thicker than mine. "These are certified copies of all the corporate documents, deeds, minutes, shareholder register, company bylaws." He slowly flipped through the pages until he reached the section he needed. "Here it is. Article 12, Section 3 of the Corporate Bylaws. The CEO can be appointed or removed only by a majority vote of the Board of Shareholders, and any executive action affecting a board member or shareholder requires prior approval from the same board." "Exactly," I said. "Robert didn't have the authority to kick me out. He didn't even have the authority to take my badge without a formal vote." "He knows you own 80%?" Richard asked. "Apparently not, or he never bothered to find out. When I named him CEO last week, I gave him administrative authorization. He can make operational decisions, sign contracts, manage personnel, but I never, ever signed a transfer of share control. I never resigned from my position on the board, and I definitely never gave him permission to disrespect me like that." Richard smiled, a small, sharp, razor-like smile. "So, technically, he just committed gross insubordination against the chairman of the board and majority shareholder of the company." "Technically," I repeated, "illegally and morally." "What do you want to do?" "I want to take back what is mine. I want my son to learn that power is not inherited by name, but earned with respect and competence, and I want that woman to understand that messing with my family was the worst mistake of her life." Richard closed the folder and looked me straight in the eye. He had worked with me long enough to know when I was serious. "I'm calling the board meeting for 4 o'clock this afternoon. I have the numbers for Alan and the other members. They'll all want to be present when they hear what happened." "Perfect. And Richard, one more thing. I need you to review all corporate communications from the last 3 months, emails, messages, new contracts Robert may have initiated. I want to know exactly what Jennifer has been doing behind the scenes. Do you suspect something specific? A woman doesn't convince a son to throw out his mother without having her own plan. Jennifer wants something, and I'm going to find out what it is before this day ends." Richard left my house with a clear mission. He had 3 hours to contact all the board members and ensure they would be present at the meeting. He also needed to access the corporate server and review all recent activity by Robert and Jennifer. We had the administrator credentials because, even though my son didn't know it, I had never given up my top-level system access. I was left alone in the living room looking at the photographs on the mantelpiece. There was one of Robert when he was 8 years old, sitting on my lap while I reviewed blueprints for our first expansion. He always wanted to be part of the business. Since he was a child, he would come to the factory with me on weekends, running between the sewing machines, asking how everything worked. He was fascinated by the numbers, the logistics, the idea of creating something from nothing. When did I lose that boy? When did he become the man who looked at me this morning as if I were a nuisance? The answer was obvious. Jennifer. But I couldn't blame just her. Robert was an adult. He made the decision to humiliate me publicly. He chose to listen to his wife's whispers over his mother's years of sacrifice. And now he was going to learn that decisions have consequences. My phone rang. It was a message from Jane, the Director of Human Resources. She had been one of the first people I hired 22 years ago, when the company really started to grow. We had gone through financial crises, labor lawsuits, changes in suppliers together, everything. She knew me better than most. The message read, "Alice, I don't know what's going on, but everyone here is very confused. Robert just sent a memo saying there were changes in the management structure and that you decided to voluntarily retire. Is this true?" Voluntarily retire. How convenient. So that was the narrative they were going to sell. I wasn't kicked out. I wasn't humiliated. I simply decided to leave because I was too old to keep working. A clean, easy-to-digest lie. I replied, "Jane, I did not resign from anything. There will be a board meeting this afternoon at 4 o'clock. After that, everything will be very clear. Please don't say anything yet." She responded immediately, "Understood. But I want you to know that no one here is happy with what happened this morning. Everyone respects you. What he did was a horrible disrespect." I put away my phone and allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. Robert might have the CEO title, but I had something much more powerful: loyalty. The people in that company knew me. They knew who built everything from scratch, and they weren't going to forget it just because my son decided to rewrite history in a corporate memo. I went to the kitchen and made myself a coffee. I needed to keep my mind clear. While the water was boiling, I mentally reviewed every step of what was going to happen in the next few hours. Richard would summon Alan, Scott, and Mary, the 3 board members besides Robert and me. With my 80% and their combined votes, I would have an absolute majority for any decision. Robert and his 5% couldn't do anything. But it wasn't just about the numbers. It was about justice. It was about teaching my son that respect is not optional, that family loyalty has value, and that misused power always ends up destroying the one who wields it. The coffee was ready. I poured myself a cup and went back to my study. I opened my laptop and entered the company's security system. Another thing Robert didn't know: I had full access to all the building's surveillance cameras. I could see in real time what was happening on every floor, every office, every hallway. I searched for this morning's recording. There it was, the exact moment I entered his office. It clearly showed him not even looking at me when he ordered my expulsion. Jennifer's smile was visible. George's discomfort when he had to carry out the order was visible. My calm face, my dignity intact as I handed over the badge, was visible. I downloaded the video and saved it in 3 different places: a copy on my computer, another on a flash drive, and another in the cloud. Irrefutable evidence of what really happened, just in case Robert tried to deny everything later. My phone rang again. This time it was Richard. "I've contacted everyone. Alan is furious. He says he can't believe Robert did something like that. Scott and Mary also confirmed attendance. Everyone will be there at 4 o'clock sharp." "Perfect. And the communications?" "This is where it gets interesting, Alice." Richard paused. "I found an email chain between Jennifer and a certain Mr. Hernandez." "Does that name ring a bell?" Hernandez. Of course it rang a bell. Victor Hernandez was the owner of a competing textile company. We had been competing for the same contracts, the same clients, for years. He was an unscrupulous man who had tried to buy our company at least 3 times in the last decade. I always told him no. The company was not for sale. "Yes, I know him. What does Jennifer have to do with Hernandez?" "She is negotiating the sale of 30% of the company's shares. Jennifer wrote to him 2 weeks ago saying that she would soon have full access to the corporate structure and that they could close the deal before the end of the month. Hernandez offered $12 million for the share package." I felt the blood freeze in my veins. $12 million. Jennifer was trying to sell part of my company to our biggest competitor. And the worst part was that those shares were not hers to sell. They were not Robert's. They were mine. "Does Robert know about this?" I asked. There is an email where she mentions to Robert a very lucrative investment opportunity that could make both of them financially independent. And he replied saying that he trusted her judgment and that she should do what was necessary. Richard sounded genuinely disgusted. "Alice, your son not only disrespected you, he was planning to commit corporate fraud." "So it's not just arrogance. It's greed. Jennifer saw an opportunity to get rich quick and convinced Robert that getting rid of me was the first step. Exactly. And if she had managed to finalize that sale, they would have violated at least 6 different corporate laws. Hernandez would have had access to confidential information, commercial strategies, customer contacts. They would have destroyed everything you built. They won't destroy anything, I said in a firm voice, because in 3 hours they are going to learn that trying to steal what is mine was the worst decision of their lives. I have all the emails printed and certified before a notary public. They are admissible legal evidence in any proceeding. If you want, I can initiate legal action against both of them for attempted fraud. Not yet. First, I want to see their faces when they realize they lost. Then we will decide what to do about the legal consequences. I hung up the phone and stared at my laptop screen. There was Robert in the security camera, sitting in his glass office, reviewing documents with Jennifer by his side. They looked so confident, so convinced that they had won. He was probably imagining his future as the all-powerful CEO, making decisions without his old-fashioned mother interfering. She was probably calculating how many designer handbags she could buy with the $12 million. Poor idiots. They had no idea that the empire they thought they had conquered was never theirs for the taking. They had no idea that every paper they signed, every decision they made, every move they executed was being documented and would be used against them. I looked at the clock. 2 hours and 40 minutes until the meeting. Enough time to shower, change into something more formal, and mentally prepare for the moment my son would discover who really held the power in this family. I showered and took my time choosing what to wear. I was not going to arrive at that meeting dressed like a defeated grandmother. I took an ivory pantsuit out of the closet that I had bought 2 years ago for an international conference. Elegant but not ostentatious. Serious but not severe. I applied light makeup, just enough to look rested and professional. I swept my silver hair back into a low, elegant bun. When I looked in the mirror, I saw the woman who had built an empire, not the lady who had been thrown out that morning. Satisfied with my appearance, I reviewed all the documents I would take to the meeting one last time. The original articles of incorporation, the share distribution register, the corporate bylaws, my husband's will stating that everything was left in my name, the security footage from this morning, and the crown jewel, the emails between Jennifer and Hernandez planning to sell what did not belong to them. I put everything in my leather briefcase, the same one I've used for 15 years, worn but reliable, like me. It was 3:20 p.m., 40 minutes before the meeting. I decided to arrive early. I wanted to be already seated when Robert walked in. I wanted to see his face when he saw me there waiting for him, as if nothing had happened. I drove back to the company building, the same building from which I had been expelled just 6 hours earlier. I parked in my usual spot, the one that had my name painted on the wall for 20 years. No one had erased the letters yet. Alice Sterling, founder. I took my briefcase and walked toward the main entrance. The guard at the reception was new. He had been working for barely 3 months. When he saw me arrive, he hesitated for a second. "Mrs. Sterling, They told me that I'm here for a board meeting," I said in a kind but firm voice. "It's scheduled for 4 o'clock on the 12th floor conference room." The young man looked at his computer, confused. "I don't have any record of—" "Call Richard Mendoza, the corporate lawyer. He will confirm it for you." The guard made the call. I heard Richard's voice on the other end explaining the situation. The young man nodded several times. He hung up and looked at me with a mixture of respect and nervousness. "You can go up, Mrs. Sterling. Excuse the confusion. Don't worry, you're just doing your job." I got into the elevator feeling every second as if time were moving in slow motion. The doors closed, and I began my ascent to the 12th floor, the same floor from which I had been escorted that morning like a criminal. But this time was different. This time I was in control of the situation. The doors opened. The hallway was quieter than in the morning. Most employees were still at their desks working. Some looked up when I passed. Their expressions were of absolute surprise. "Alice is back," I heard someone whisper. I walked straight to the conference room, a huge room with a mahogany table that could seat 20 people, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the city, and state-of-the-art screens on the walls. We had invested $200,000 in remodeling that room 3 years ago. Richard was already there, organizing documents on the table. When he saw me enter, he smiled. "You're early." I wanted to be ready. "Has anyone else arrived?" "Alan is on his way. He called me 10 minutes ago. Scott and Mary will arrive right at 4. They are furious, Alice. Everyone is furious about what Robert did." I sat in my usual place, at the head of the table, the spot I had occupied for 40 years in every important meeting. I placed my briefcase in front of me and took out the folders organized by topic. Everything had to be perfect. There could be no mistakes. 5 minutes later, Alan arrived. He was a man of 74, tall, with a perfectly trimmed white beard and blue eyes that always seemed to be evaluating everything. He had been my husband's silent partner from the beginning, the one who put up the first $10,000 when no one else believed in our idea. Now that man had 5% of the shares and was one of my most loyal allies. "Alice," he said, hugging me tightly, "I can't believe what that boy did. His father would be ashamed." "I know, but today we're going to fix this. Darn right we're going to fix it. Excuse my language, but that kid needs to learn some manners." Scott arrived 3 minutes later. He was younger than Alan, only 62, but he had worked with us since we opened the second factory. He had 3% of the shares and managed our entire international supply chain. He was a logistics genius and one of the most honest men I knew. "This is outrageous," he said as soon as he entered. "I've been getting calls from employees all afternoon asking what the heck is going on. No one understands why the founder of their own company was kicked out." "Everything will make sense soon," I assured him. Mary was the last to arrive. She was the only woman besides me on the board. She had 2% of the shares and handled all our finances. She was a certified public accountant, she was 58 years old, and had an impeccable reputation in the industry. If Mary said the numbers added up, they added up. If she said something smelled fishy, something smelled fishy. "I reviewed the finances this afternoon after Richard called me," she said, sitting down. "There are strange movements in the accounts from the last 15 days. Small transfers to accounts I don't recognize. Payments to external consultants we never approved. Someone is moving money without board authorization. I have a theory about that," Richard said, handing her a copy of the emails between Jennifer and Hernandez. Mary read in silence. Her expression went from confusion to disbelief and finally to pure anger. This woman was preparing the ground to sell the company piece by piece. These external consultants are probably Hernandez's lawyers doing due diligence without us knowing. "Exactly," I confirmed. "Jennifer convinced Robert that getting rid of me was the first step to taking total control. They didn't count on the fact that I am still the legal owner of 80% of this company." Alan let out a dry laugh. "That boy never bothered to read the corporate documents, did he? Apparently he assumed that being named CEO meant he was now in charge of everything. He didn't understand the difference between administrative authority and stock ownership." "Fatal error," Scott said. "An error that is going to cost him dearly." I looked at the clock. 3:58 p.m. In 2 minutes, Robert would walk into this room expecting to preside over his first board meeting as CEO. In 2 minutes, he would discover that the power he thought he had was never real. The door opened. Robert walked in first, dressed in an expensive black suit, his hair slicked back with gel, a look of smug confidence on his face. Jennifer came in behind him, wearing a fitted wine-colored dress and those darn heels that clicked with every step. Robert's smile disappeared as soon as he saw me sitting at the head of the table. "Mom, what are you doing here?" His voice sounded annoyed, as if I were a child who hadn't understood the rules of the game. "I'm at a board meeting, Robert. Where else would I be?" Jennifer moved closer to him and whispered something in his ear. Robert nodded and cleared his throat. "Mom, I appreciate you coming, but this is an executive-level meeting. You are no longer part of the company's operating structure. You decided to retire this morning, remember?" "I didn't decide anything," I said in a calm voice. "You kicked me out, in front of all the employees. You called me the lady and ordered security to escort me to the exit, but apparently you forgot to check one small detail before doing all that." "What detail?" Jennifer asked with a defiant tone. Richard stood up and placed a certified copy of the shareholder register in front of Robert. "The detail that your mother-in-law owns 80% of this company. the detail that you only own 5%, and the detail that according to Article 12, Section 3 of the corporate bylaws, which apparently you never bothered to read, only the majority shareholder has the authority to convene or dismiss the CEO. The silence that followed was so thick it could be cut with a knife. Robert looked at the documents, then he looked at me, then he looked back at the documents. His face went from confidence to confusion and finally to barely concealed panic. "But you named me CEO. You gave me the job." "I gave you administrative authorization, Robert. I did not give you control over the company, and I definitely did not give you permission to disrespect me." Jennifer stepped forward before Robert could answer. "This is ridiculous. Robert is the legally appointed CEO. You can't just show up and take what is his." "What is his?" I repeated calmly. "Tell me, Jennifer, what exactly is his? The 5% of shares I gave him years ago? The CEO title I granted him last week? Or are you referring to the $12 million you plan to get by selling 30% of my company to Victor Hernandez?" The color drained from Jennifer's face, as if someone had opened a valve and let all the blood out. Robert looked at her, not understanding. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Richard placed a thick folder on the table. "We are talking about this. A complete chain of emails between your wife and our biggest competitor. Emails where she promises to deliver confidential company information, access to our clients, and a 30% share package valued at $12 million. Emails dated from 3 weeks ago. Emails that include your explicit approval to proceed with the transaction." "That's not true," Jennifer said, her voice trembling. "That's a misinterpretation. I was exploring legitimate investment options to diversify the company's portfolio." "Legitimate investment options?" Mary stood up from her chair with a copy of the financial statements in her hand. "Is that why there are unauthorized transfers totaling $350,000 to external consultants that no one on this board approved? Is that why there are payments to a law firm that happens to be the same one that represents Hernandez?" Robert took the folder and started reading. His hands trembled slightly as he turned the pages. I watched him in silence, seeing how every word he read destroyed the reality he thought he knew. "Jennifer." His voice came out weak, almost broken. "What is this?" "It's exactly what it looks like," Alan said with disgust. "Your wife convinced you to kick out your mother so you could sell off pieces of the company without supervision. She used you as a puppet to execute a plan that would have made you both rich and destroyed everything your family built over 40 years. "No." Jennifer shook her head forcefully. "It's not like that. Robert, don't believe them. Your mother is inventing all of this because she can't accept that she's no longer in charge. She's jealous that you're the CEO now." "I recorded it," I said simply. Jennifer froze. "I have the complete video from this morning. Every word you said, every gesture, the way you smiled when my son humiliated me, the way you looked at me as if I were trash. Everything is documented and saved in 4 different places." Richard took out his laptop and connected it to the large screen in the room. In seconds, the scene from this morning played in high definition. There was Robert, not looking up from his computer. "We are removing the lady from the company immediately." There was Jennifer leaning against the filing cabinet with that victorious smile. There I was, handing over my badge with dignity, while everyone watched. The video ended. No one said anything for a long, uncomfortable moment. Robert dropped the folder on the table. The pages scattered. He put his hands to his face and took a deep breath. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded shattered. "My God, what have I done?" "You made the mistake of trusting the wrong person," I said. "You made the mistake of thinking that power is about yelling and humiliating. And you made the mistake of forgetting that I am your mother, but I am also the owner of this company." Scott crossed his arms. "The question now is what we are going to do about it. Why can't this stand?" "You're right," I said, getting up from my chair. "That's why I called this emergency board meeting. According to the corporate bylaws, I have the right to put to a vote the immediate removal of the CEO for grave cause. The causes include insubordination to a board member, attempted corporate fraud, and violation of the company's core values." Jennifer stepped forward. "You can't do that. Robert didn't do anything illegal." "Oh, no?" Mary opened another folder. He signed authorizations to move funds without board approval. That violates Article 8 of our bylaws. He approved contracts with external consultants without proper due diligence. That violates our compliance policies. And he participated in negotiations to sell corporate assets without informing the board. That not only violates internal bylaws, it also violates federal corporate law. Every word was a nail in the coffin of Robert's career as CEO. "I didn't know," Robert said desperately. "Jennifer told me they were strategic investments. She told me you were blocking the company's growth by being too conservative. She told me that if we didn't take control now, the company would stagnate." "And you believed her," I said, feeling a mixture of disappointment and sadness. "You believed a woman you've known for 3 years over the mother who raised you for 45. You believed someone with no experience in this industry over the founder who turned 3 sewing machines into an $87 million annual company." Robert had no answer for that. He simply bowed his head. "I propose the immediate removal of Robert Sterling as CEO," Allen said formally, "and I propose the permanent expulsion of Jennifer Sterling from all corporate facilities and the prohibition of any contact with employees or company matters." "I second the motion," Scott said. "Me too," Mary added. Richard took notes. "Very well. According to the shareholder register, we have present Alice with 80%, Allen with 5%, Scott with 3%, Mary with 2%, and Robert with 5%. For the motion to pass, we need approval from at least 60% of the votes." Everyone looked at Robert. Technically, he could vote. His 5% wouldn't change the final result because I alone had enough to approve anything, but it was a matter of principle. "How do you vote, Robert?" Richard asked. My son looked at me. There were tears in his eyes. For the first time in months, I saw the boy he used to be, not the arrogant man he had become. "I'm sorry, Mom. I am so sorry." "That doesn't answer the question," I said, keeping my voice firm, even though my heart was breaking inside. "I vote in favor," he whispered. "I remove myself." Jennifer let out a gasp. "Robert, are you crazy? You can't just resign like that." "Yes, I can," he said without looking at her. "And I should have from the moment you asked me to kick out my mother. I should have realized that I was making the biggest mistake of my life." "The vote is unanimous then," Richard said, writing in his notebook. "Robert Sterling is hereby removed as CEO, effective immediately. Jennifer Sterling is prohibited from entering the facilities and from having contact with corporate matters. This decision is recorded in the official board minutes." Jennifer looked at me with pure hatred in her eyes. "This is not going to stand. I'm going to sue. I'm going to take this to every media outlet I can find. I'm going to destroy this company's reputation." "You can try," I said calmly. "But I have recordings, emails, financial statements, and testimonies from 5 board members confirming attempted fraud. You have 2 options. Sign a non-disclosure agreement right now and leave here with some dignity, or face criminal charges for conspiracy to commit corporate fraud. You decide." Jennifer opened her mouth to reply, but Richard already had a document prepared. He slid it across the table toward her. "This is a confidentiality and non-disclosure agreement. You sign this, you commit not to speak publicly about any internal company matter, and in exchange we will not press criminal charges against you. You have 30 seconds to decide." "This is extortion," Jennifer hissed. "No, this is mercy," Allen said. "If I were in Alice's place, you would already be talking to the police, but she is being more generous than you deserve." Jennifer looked at Robert for support. He was still sitting with his head bowed, not looking at her. Finally, she took the pen Richard offered and signed the document with violent, fast strokes. She threw the pen onto the table. "I hope you are proud of yourself. You destroyed your own son's future for ego." "I didn't destroy anything," I replied. "You 2 tried to steal what didn't belong to you, and now you face the consequences. The difference is that I built this empire with honest work. You tried to take it with lies and betrayal." Jennifer grabbed her purse and walked toward the door. Before leaving, she turned to Robert one last time. "Are you coming, or are you staying here begging for forgiveness like a child?" Robert finally looked up. "I think it's better if you go alone, Jennifer. I need to talk to my mother." Jennifer's expression turned from rage to disbelief. After everything I did for you, after all the plans we made together, this is how you repay me?" "You didn't do anything for me," Robert said in a tired voice. "You used my position for your benefit. You turned me into someone I don't recognize, and you almost destroyed my relationship with my mother in the process. So yes, I think it's better if you go." Jennifer let out a bitter laugh. "You're a coward, just like your father probably was, a family of sentimental losers." Richard got up from his chair with a serious expression. "Ma'am, I suggest you leave right now before I add defamation to the list of legal problems you already have." Jennifer left, slamming the door. The sound echoed in the conference room like thunder. No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, Alan broke the silence. "Well, that was awkward but necessary. Now we need to decide who is going to fill the CEO position while we sort out this situation." Everyone looked at me. I already knew what they had to say before they opened their mouths. "Alice, you are the only logical choice," Mary said. "You know every aspect of the business. You have the experience. You have the respect of the employees. Legally, as the majority shareholder, you have every right." I shook my head. "No, I am not coming back as permanent CEO. I already did that job for 40 years. But I will assume the role temporarily until we find someone suitable." "For how long?" Scott asked. 6 months. Enough time to stabilize operations, repair any damage that has been done, and look for an external candidate with real experience in the industry. Someone who is not family. Someone who understands that this business is built with respect and hard work, not with shortcuts and betrayals. Alan nodded. "That sounds reasonable. All in favor?" Hands went up. Even Robert raised his, although his gesture was weak and defeated. "Approved unanimously," Richard said. "Alice Sterling assumes the role of interim CEO for a period of 6 months beginning today. This will be documented and communicated to all employees first thing tomorrow morning." "And what do we do with Robert?" Mary asked, looking at him. Not with cruelty, but with genuine concern. "That is a good question." I looked at my son. He finally held my gaze. His eyes were red. His posture was completely different from the arrogant man who had thrown me out that morning. "Robert, what do you want to do?" "I don't know," he admitted. "I'm clearly not ready to run a company. I thought I was, but I was just fooling myself. Or worse, I let Jennifer fool me." "I'm going to make you a proposal," I said. "You keep your 5% of shares. I won't take that away because it is legally yours, and because despite everything, you are still my son. But you are going to start over from the bottom. You are going to work in every department of this company for the next 6 months. Production, logistics, sales, finance, human resources. You are going to learn how this business really works, not from a glass office, but from the factory floor." "And after the 6 months?" he asked. "After that, we will evaluate if you have learned anything. If you demonstrate humility, hard work, and respect for the people who make this company run, we can talk about giving you a managerial position. But you will never be CEO again. That ship has sailed." Robert nodded slowly. "That's fair. More than fair considering what I did." "There's one more condition," I added. "I want you to go to therapy. Individual, not couples therapy. You need to understand how you got to this point, how you let someone manipulate you so easily, and how to get back to the man you used to be." "I'll do it," he said. "I promise." Alan cleared his throat. "If you'll allow me, I'd like to add something. Robert, your father was my best friend. I watched him build this business with your mother from scratch. He made mistakes too, we all do. But he always had the humility to admit them and learn from them. If you really want to honor his memory, that's the way." Robert wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Thank you, Alan. I'll keep that in mind." The meeting extended another hour as we discussed logistical details, how to communicate the changes to the employees, how to handle the accounts Jennifer had compromised, how to contact Hernandez and make it clear that any deal he thought he had with us was permanently canceled. Richard would take the legal lead on that front, ensuring that Hernandez understood that any attempt to use the information Jennifer had given him would result in massive lawsuits. When we finally finished, it was almost 7:00 p.m. Mary, Scott, and Alan said goodbye. They hugged me one by one before leaving. "We'll get through this," Mary said. This company has survived economic crises, pandemics, market changes. It will survive this too. When everyone was gone, only Richard, Robert, and I remained in the conference room. Richard packed his documents in silence, giving us space. Before leaving, he put a hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing, Alice. It was difficult, but it was right." "Thank you, Richard, for everything." He nodded and left, closing the door softly behind him. I was left alone with my son. The silence between us was dense, full of unsaid things, of years of emotional distance that had become an abyss this morning. Robert spoke first. "I don't expect you to forgive me. Not now, maybe never. But I need you to know that I am sorry. I am so sorry that I don't have enough words to express it." I sat down next to him, not at the head of the table, but beside him, as a mother, not as CEO. "Do you know what the part that hurt me the most was? It wasn't that you kicked me out. It wasn't the public humiliation. It was that you didn't even look me in the eye when you did it, as if I wasn't even worth that." "I was afraid," he admitted, "afraid to see the disappointment on your face, afraid to realize that I was making a terrible mistake. So I kept my eyes on the computer and pretended it was just a necessary business move, but it was pure cowardice." We sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the city was beginning to light up with night lights. From that height, everything looked small, tidy, under control. But in here, in this room, everything had been chaos for hours. "When did it start?" I finally asked. "When did you start seeing me as an obstacle instead of your mother?" Robert ran his hands through his hair. "I think it was gradual. Jennifer started planting seeds of doubt months ago. Small comments at first. That you had an old-fashioned mindset. That you didn't understand modern markets. That I could never grow professionally while under your shadow. At first I ignored her, but she was persistent. And I wanted to believe I was ready for something bigger." "Ego is a dangerous thing," I said, "especially when someone knows exactly how to feed it. I should have seen it. The signs were all there. The way she always had an opinion about company decisions, even though she had never worked in this industry. The way she constantly asked about shareholders and legal structures. The way she gradually pulled me away from you until we practically stopped talking outside of work. And when you named me CEO, she saw her chance. Yes, she told me this was our moment. That if we didn't take total control now, we would never be independent. That you would never voluntarily retire, and that I had to be firm. Make a statement of authority from day one. And that statement had to be humiliating me publicly?" Robert closed his eyes. "She said that if I treated you gently, the employees would think you were still in charge, that I needed to establish immediate dominance so everyone would understand there was new leadership. It sounds so stupid now when I say it out loud." "Because it is stupid. True leadership is not about dominance or humiliation. It's about earned respect, correct decisions, taking care of the people who work for you. Your father understood that. I understood that. But you let yourself be convinced that power is about shouting louder than everyone else." "You're right. And now I've lost everything. My position, my marriage, your respect." "You haven't lost everything," I said softly. "You still have the opportunity to learn. You still have the chance to become the man your father would have wanted you to be. But it's going to require real work. It's going to require humility, and it's going to require you to accept that you might never reach the level you thought you deserved." "I understand, and I'm going to do the work. I promise." We sat for a while longer. Finally, I stood up. "It's late. You should go home and rest. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. I'm going to communicate the changes to all employees in a general meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning." "Are you sure?" His voice sounded uncertain. "They need to see you. They need to see you accept the consequences of your actions, and they need to see you commit to being better. That is part of the process." Robert nodded and stood up. We walked to the elevator together. Before the doors opened, he turned to me. "Mom, do you think you can ever forgive me?" I looked him in the eye. "I already forgave you, Robert, because you are my son, and you always will be. But forgiveness doesn't mean things go back to the way they were. It means I'm willing to give you the opportunity to earn back my trust. That depends entirely on you." The elevator doors opened. He stepped in and turned to look at me one last time before the doors closed. "Thank you for not giving up on me." The doors closed, and I was left alone in the hallway. I walked back to what had been Robert's office. My office now, at least for the next 6 months. I sat down in the chair behind the solid oak desk and looked at the city through the windows. 40 years. 40 years building something from nothing. 40 years of sacrifices, difficult decisions, sleepless nights. And in a single day, I almost lost everything because of my own son's arrogance and the greed of a woman who never understood what it truly meant to build something. But I didn't lose it. I got it back. Because I knew exactly what to do and when to do it. Because I never gave up real control, even when it seemed like I had. Because I understood that true power is not in titles or fancy offices, but in knowing exactly where the documents that matter are. My phone vibrated. It was a message from Jane. "I just heard what happened in the board meeting. The news is already running through the whole building. Everyone is relieved you are back. Do you need anything?" I replied. "Prepare a call for the general meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. All employees. I'm going to personally explain what happened and what the plan is going forward." She responded immediately with a thumbs-up emoji. I turned off the office lights and went down to the parking lot. The building was almost empty at this hour. My steps echoed on the concrete as I walked to my car. I sat behind the wheel, but didn't start the engine immediately. I just allowed myself a moment to process everything that had happened in a single day. This morning, I had been expelled from my own company. Tonight, I was back as CEO with more power than I had before. My son had learned a brutal but necessary lesson. A woman who tried to destroy my legacy was gone forever. And I had proven that 40 years of experience and knowledge will always triumph over youthful arrogance. I drove home feeling something I hadn't felt in months: control, clarity, renewed purpose. When I arrived, the house was dark and quiet. I walked in, left my briefcase in the study, and went straight to the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of red wine, something I rarely did but felt deserved tonight. I sat on the living room sofa with the glass in my hand and looked at the photographs on the walls. My husband smiling at me from the frame, Robert as a child, the first factory, all the moments that defined our history. "I wish you were here to see this," I said to my husband's photograph. "Our son made a terrible mistake today, but I think he is finally going to start understanding what you and I always knew, that building something real requires more than ambition. It requires integrity." I took a sip of wine and closed my eyes. Tomorrow would be another complicated day. I would have to face the employees, explain what happened without completely destroying Robert's reputation, and begin the process of repairing any damage Jennifer had caused with her unauthorized negotiations. But for now, in this moment, I allowed myself to simply be satisfied. Satisfied with having fought for what was mine. Satisfied with having maintained my dignity, even in humiliation. Satisfied with knowing that when the time came to prove who truly had the power, I did it with elegance, precision, and justice. The phone rang. It was Alan. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay," he said. "It was an intense day." "I'm fine. Tired, but fine." "What you did today was extraordinary, Alice. You kept your composure when anyone else would have exploded. You handled the situation with class. Your husband would be proud." "Thank you, Alan. That means a lot coming from you. Get some rest. Tomorrow the real work of rebuilding begins." I hung up and finished my glass of wine. He was right. Tomorrow the real work began, but tonight I would allow myself to enjoy the silent victory of having recovered what was mine without losing my soul in the process. I woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning, not because of the alarm, but because my body was already used to that schedule after 40 years of routine. I made myself a strong coffee and sat in the kitchen as the sun began to rise. Today was the day I would have to face all the employees and explain what had happened. I couldn't show weakness. I couldn't show doubt. I had to be the leader I had always been. I showered. I dressed in a pearl gray pantsuit, elegant but approachable. I put on just enough makeup to look rested, even though I had only slept 5 hours. I looked in the mirror one last time before leaving. The woman looking back at me was the same one who had built an empire, the same one who had survived losses, crises, and betrayals, and the same one who would continue forward no matter what obstacles appeared. I arrived at the company at 7:30 a.m. The parking lot was almost empty still. I went up to my office and found a pile of documents on the desk that Richard had left the night before. Updated financial reports, pending contracts for review, press releases that needed approval. Corporate life didn't stop just because we had a family drama. At 8 o'clock, Mary arrived at my office with 2 cups of coffee. "I brought you this. You're going to need extra caffeine for the meeting." "Thanks. How is the atmosphere downstairs?" "Tense. Everyone knows something big happened yesterday, but no one has complete details. There are rumors circulating. Some say Robert resigned voluntarily. Others say there was a corporate coup. One particularly creative one suggests Jennifer tried to poison you." I let out a laugh despite everything. "Well, metaphorically, she did try to poison me, only she used my son's ambition instead of arsenic. Do you know what you are going to say?" "I'm going to tell the truth. Obviously without all the sordid details, but the truth nonetheless. That there was a misunderstanding about authority and corporate structure, that decisions were made without the appropriate board approval, that I never resigned from my position, and that I am now back to ensure the company's stability. And Robert? He will be present. He will apologize publicly, and he will announce that he will begin a professional development program working in different departments. I am not going to completely destroy him in front of the employees. He is still my son, but I am also not going to lie and pretend he didn't make grave mistakes." Mary nodded. "It's the right approach, firm but fair." At 8:45 a.m., employees began arriving at the second-floor auditorium. I watched from my office window as they came in. I recognized so many faces, people who had worked with me for years, people whose weddings I had attended, whose children I knew by name, whose stories were part of the fabric of this company. Robert arrived at 8:50 a.m. He walked into my office without knocking, something that would normally have annoyed me, but I let it slide today. He looked terrible. Swollen eyes, unshaven beard, wrinkled suit. He clearly hadn't slept much. "Are you ready?" I asked him. "No, but I'm going to do it anyway." "Good. That's growth." We went down to the auditorium together. When we entered, the murmur of conversations abruptly stopped. All eyes were on us. I walked toward the small stage at the front, while Robert sat in the first row next to Alan, Scott, and Mary. The auditorium was completely full, more than 200 employees present, some sitting, others standing at the back, everyone waiting for an explanation. "Good morning, everyone," I began. My voice sounded clear and firm thanks to the microphones. "I know yesterday was a confusing and unsettling day for many of you. I know rumors circulated, that there was uncertainty, and that some of you witnessed very uncomfortable moments. I am here this morning to clarify exactly what happened and what the path forward is." The silence was absolute. I could have heard a pin drop. 1 week ago, I made the decision to appoint my son Robert as CEO of this company. I did it because I believed he was ready. I believed he had learned enough, that he had the necessary maturity, and that it was time for the next generation to take the reins. However, what I did not communicate clearly was the difference between administrative authority and stock control. I paused and let those words sink in. Yesterday morning, Robert made a decision that he did not have the authority to make. He expelled me from this building in front of many of you. Some of you saw it directly, others heard about it, and all of you wondered how it was possible for the founder of this company to be treated that way. I saw some employees nodding. Others exchanged glances. What Robert didn't understand, because I didn't communicate it clearly enough, is that I never resigned from my position on the board of directors. I never transferred my stock control. I still own 80% of this company, and according to our corporate bylaws, only I have the authority to dismiss or appoint the CEO. The murmurs began. I could see the understanding spreading through the auditorium like ripples in a pond. Yesterday afternoon, the board of directors met in an emergency session. After reviewing the facts, evaluating the decisions made, and considering the well-being of this company and all the people who work in it, the board voted unanimously to remove Robert as CEO. That vote included Robert's own vote, who acknowledged that he had acted inappropriately. I looked toward where my son was sitting. He kept his head bowed, but his shoulders were straight. He was listening to every word. The board also voted to appoint me interim CEO for a period of 6 months. During that time, we are going to stabilize operations. We are going to ensure that all processes are working correctly, and we are going to look for a permanent candidate for the position, someone with proven experience in our industry who can lead this company into the future. A hand went up in the third row. It was Scott from Logistics, not the one on the board, but a young employee who had started just 2 years ago. Yes? I signaled for him to speak. Mrs. Sterling, does this mean things are going to go back to the way they were? Yes and no, I answered honestly. Are things going to return to normal in the sense that there will be stability, clarity in decision-making, and mutual respect between all levels of the organization? Yes, but no, in the sense that we all learned valuable lessons yesterday. I learned that I need to better communicate authority structures. Robert learned that a title does not guarantee respect. And I hope all of you learned that in this company, regardless of your position, no one is above the fundamental values of dignity and respect. Another hand went up. Jane from Human Resources. What's going to happen to Robert? Is he leaving the company? I looked at my son. He looked up and our eyes met. I motioned for him to come up to the stage. He hesitated for a second, but finally stood up and walked toward me. I passed him the microphone. Robert's voice trembled slightly as he began to speak. Good morning, everyone. Many of you have known me for years, some since I was a child running around the factory. Others met me when I formally started working here 10 years ago, and all of you deserve an apology. He cleared his throat. Tears shone in his eyes, but he didn't let them fall. Yesterday, I made the biggest mistake of my professional and personal life. I humiliated my mother, the founder of this company, the woman who sacrificed everything to build something that provides employment for all of us. I did it because I was blinded by misguided ambition, because I listened to the wrong advice, and because I forgot the values my parents taught me about respect, humility, and honest work. The auditorium was completely silent. I don't expect you to forgive me immediately. I don't expect you to trust me as you did before. But I do hope to have the opportunity to earn back that respect. I am going to spend the next 6 months working in different departments of this company. I am going to learn from scratch how every process really works. And I am going to prove with actions, not with words, that I can be better than I was yesterday. I gently took the microphone from him. Robert will remain with the company as a minority shareholder and an employee in training. He will not have any position of authority during this period. He will report to department managers like any other employee, and he will be evaluated by his performance and attitude, not by his last name. I looked out at the entire auditorium. I want everyone to understand something very clearly. This company exists because each of you does your job with dedication and professionalism every day. It does not exist because of my last name. It does not exist because of fancy titles or offices on the 12th floor. It exists because there are real people doing real work that adds real value to our customers. The next 6 months are going to be hard work, I continued. We are going to review every process, every contract, every relationship with clients and suppliers. We are going to ensure that this company is in the most solid position possible, and we are going to do it together as the team we have always been. I saw heads nodding throughout the auditorium. The tension that had filled the space when I walked in began to slowly dissipate. If anyone has questions or concerns during this transition period, my door is open. Literally. You do not need an appointment. If something worries you about your job, about the direction of the company, or about anything related to your well-being here, I want to hear it directly from you. An older woman in the back raised her hand timidly. It was Rose, one of the most experienced sewing machine operators we had. She had been working with us for 32 years. Yes, Rose? Ms. Alice, I just want to say that all of us here in production are very happy that you are back. Yesterday we were very confused and worried. You have always treated us with respect and fairness. It gives us peace of mind to know that you are in charge again. Her words touched me deeply. Thank you, Rose. And I want you and everyone in production to know that your jobs are safe, There will be no layoffs. There will be no drastic restructurings. What there will be is stability and responsible growth. Another hand went up. It was George, the security guard who had to escort me the day before. Mrs. Sterling, I just wanted to apologize for yesterday. I was following orders, but I felt terrible doing it. George, you have nothing to apologize for. You were doing your job. I will never blame you for following instructions from your supervisor. Anything else? I asked, looking at the auditorium. No one raised a hand. Good. Then, I'll let you get back to work. We have contracts to fulfill, clients to serve, and a reputation to maintain. People started to get up. Some approached to greet me personally. Robert stayed to the side, watching. No one approached him directly, but no one showed him open hostility either. The following days were intense. I called each of our main clients. All expressed confidence in my leadership. Richard corresponded with Hernandez's lawyers. As we predicted, he signed a non-disclosure agreement. Problem solved. Jennifer tried to contact Robert several times. He ignored all her calls. I suggested he block any future communication. He did. The following Monday, Robert showed up at the factory at 7 o'clock in the morning, dressed in jeans and a work shirt. The production supervisor put him to work immediately. No privileges, no special treatment. I occasionally walked through the production floor. I saw Robert struggling with machines he had never operated. I saw sweat on his forehead as he loaded rolls of fabric, but I also saw determination. He didn't complain once. Rose stopped me in the hallway one day. "Your son is making a good effort, Ms. Alice. At first we thought he would only last a few days, but he's been here every morning on time. He asks questions. He accepts corrections." The months passed. The company completely stabilized. Robert completed his rotation in production and moved to logistics. Scott reported that he was learning quickly. Then came sales, where he learned how difficult it is to maintain business relationships based on trust. In the 5th month, we found the perfect candidate for CEO, a woman named Patricia with 25 years of experience in the industry. I presented her to the board, and everyone agreed. One evening, 2 weeks before my period as interim CEO ended, Robert knocked on my office door. "Do you have a minute?" he asked. "Of course. Come in." He sat down across from my desk. He looked different than he had 6 months ago, more humble. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to really learn how this company works. And thank you for teaching me that true leadership has nothing to do with yelling or humiliating. You have worked hard, Robert. You have shown real commitment. I'm proud of that. I've been in therapy as you asked, 2 sessions per week. I'm learning a lot about myself, about how I let ego cloud my judgment. That's difficult work, harder than anything you've done in this company. I know, but I think I finally understand what you and Dad always knew, that true power doesn't need to announce itself. It simply exists." I smiled. "Your father would be proud to hear you say that." We walked to the elevator together. Before the doors opened, Robert hugged me. A real, long hug, the kind he hadn't given me in years. "I love you, Mom, and I'm sorry I forgot that for a while." "I love you too, son. I always have, even when you threw me out of this building." 2 weeks later, on my last official day as interim CEO, I gathered the entire executive team. Patricia was present, ready to officially take over. I handed her the office keys. "This company is in excellent hands," I told her in front of everyone. There was applause, hugs, a few tears, but it wasn't a permanent goodbye. I was still the majority shareholder. I was still a member of the board. That night, in the quiet of my house, I sat on the same sofa where I had planned my counterattack 6 months ago. I looked at the photographs on the walls, and I thought about everything that had happened. My son had kicked me out of my own company. I had been publicly humiliated, but I had not given up. I had used my knowledge, my preparation, and my legal power to recover what was mine. Not with violence, not with shouting, but with dignity, strategy, and justice. And in the end, I had gained something more valuable than a corporate title. I had recovered my son. Not the boy he once was, but the man he was finally learning to be. True power, I thought as I turned off the lights, doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to humiliate. It doesn't need to constantly announce itself. It simply exists, silent, strategic, unshakable. And that lesson, more than any contract or bank account, was the true legacy I would leave.